Good morning. We are live. It is Friday, January 12th in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We are hearing H719, a large House bill around housing. And we're going to hear from some of the lead sponsors of the bill first. And we have Ellen from Ledge Council in the room to help answer any questions. Representative Lisa Hingo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, for the invitation to be here today. S719, an act relating to housing development and unit rehabilitation, is the product of this tripartisan group of legislators engaging in conversations with our constituents, state agencies, developers, municipalities, the administration, and each other to bring a comprehensive package to the legislature that addresses the housing crisis by focusing on creating new units for all Vermonters. Why did we put aside political differences to come together to write this legislation? We all saw a need in our communities. Representative Sims and I have a shortage of housing for teachers and staff at our rural schools and for employees at our ski areas and related businesses. Representative Small sees new Americans and others being turned away from their apartments by rent increases with few alternatives within walking distance of schools, stores, and public transportation. Representative Bartley feels the crunch in her district of people who work in Chittenden County but cannot afford the price of housing there, migrating to southern Franklin County to look for homes, further driving up the price of real estate and exacerbating the situation for people who already live and work in Franklin County. We all know older Vermonters who wish to downsize, but cannot because there are no smaller homes available to move into. Simply put, we need more units, apartments, single-family homes, multi-family homes, condominium complexes, ADUs, manufactured homes. So there is something for everyone and for every budget. Some families will need financial assistance to get into their first homes. Others may need it to rehabilitate existing units and bring them back online. But the goal is to create more units so everyone has a place to call home. We know that the regulatory process, though well-intentioned and designed for Vermont that was seeing unprecedented growth 50 years ago, needs to be modernized to encompass Vermont's needs in 2025 and beyond. The legislation before you starts this conversation with concepts that we all could get behind and hope that your committee will bring forward in your bill. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce it to you, and I can take some questions if you'd like. We could. I can turn this over to Representative.
Well, you don't actually, given how tight the room is, I would encourage us to, you can speak for you're all equally well heard. So given that maybe if one of you would just run down all the things you cover in this bill. And because, as you know, we're doing our own housing bill here in the Senate, and we've just been working on it, Keisha, Ledge Council and I this morning. And so it would be wonderful to hear the things that you are identifying as the most pressing things for us to address.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to turn that over to Representative Bartley to do just that. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us here today. We've been really excited about this opportunity and the work that we've done together in hopes to bring forward a very holistic legislation regarding jurisdictional change.
Ashley, just introduce yourself for the record.
Sorry, Representative Ashley Bartley. So as Representative Hingo had mentioned, instead of addressing the housing crisis in different silos, we felt the need to present one large bill with a little bit of something for everybody. And I figured it'd just be easier to break everything down quick and easy. And I think 6 different bullet points, just to send our message on these are what's most important. Our bill, I think, is 36 pages. So wanted to make it easy. So the first is change to Act 250 jurisdiction and triggers. A lot of times when we have developers, I know we've heard testimony in my committee saying, you know, we want to build affordable housing. We want to build more housing for Vermonters, but as soon as we get to after that 9th unit, we just stop. We don't want to trigger Act 250. So by changing this jurisdiction, changing the triggers, it encourages more density where we have the infrastructure and incentives to grow while continuing to protect the green space outside of those areas. We love Vermont, that's why we live here. We want to make sure that it stays the way that it is. Appeals reform, we felt definitely needed to be readdressed, which just narrows the scope of what the appeals actually does, and requests and requires individuals with more skin in the game trying to appeal housing development. And then adjustment to municipal zoning practices and currently inhibits unit generation. We're once again trying to encourage density, encouraging infill, and missing middle development. Then we have adjustments to state and local permitting jurisdiction. So this will encourage the conversion of hotel motels to permanent residential units. We in both bodies are very concerned about our most vulnerable, and we really wanted to make sure that that was encompassed in this legislation. Tax incentives, I am not going to sit here and really get into the tax incentives. Representatives Sims might have better information, or even Commissioner Bolio, but really our tax incentives are to encourage investment in blighted neighborhoods or blighted structures in those neighborhoods that have kind of been long forgotten. And then a set of budget items focused on continuing to invest in funding unit generation. We know we've all heard the governor's state of state. We know that our budget is not what we would like it to be, and we know that we need to be financially and fiscally responsible, but in our bill there are some budget asks as well. Like I said, short, quick, simple. Those are kind of our 6 main points.
There are several things right there that will not be short conversations or simple solutions. But
they were
great idea.
points. And I will ask Representative Sims.
Musical chairs. Good morning, Representative Sims from Crestbury. Excited to be here, building on the presentation of my colleagues. I want to start just by thanking you all again for the incredible work that you all did with S100, the Home Act last year. Proud to collaborate across chambers to pass a really historic housing bill, and see our bill as trying to build on that conversation. And first wanted to just pause and be like, the work we did with S100 is already making a difference in my communities. So St. Johnsbury now has a warming shelter because of the buy right measures that you included in that work that allowed the community to move forward with that critical project. There are rental units being rehabbed with VHIP dollars in Hardwick and across my communities. The Sacred Heart project up in Newport, which has sat waiting for redevelopment for years, now has funding to move forward thanks to the missing middle homeownership program. So this work that you all did matters. It is already making a difference in accelerating housing development in the far corners of Vermont, where I'm from. And we know that it was a start. It's not enough. We got to keep doing this work, continue those historic investments in the programs that we know are working, and continue to revisit our land use regulations so that we are doing the original intent, preserve and protect our environmental resources, and also direct out development to the places where we know it's smart and sustainable. Infill development in our villages and downtowns where we have the water and sewer infrastructure and the robust zoning and bylaw regulation. We can't just lock everything up. If we want to keep the farmland and the hillsides pristine, we need to tell people where we can build more units to meet the demand that we know we are seeing all across the state. So I'm happy to go into another level of detail beyond Assie's presentation if that's helpful, or also we could just sort of jump to questions. what would be most useful? Slightly higher level of
You
detail?
might just, given that many, a number of us have just been chatting about the finances of our bill.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your appropriation asks are here. Is that
Yeah.
a good? Is that
Yeah,
just
so,
a question
and maybe
before we-
before, there's one thing that I really want to make sure to flag, because again, it like builds on the work that you did around by right, around emergency
Right.
shelters. So in my community, there was a mental health urgent and crisis care center proposed, and a local DRB, sort of did we love the idea, but not here.
Right.
And so this bill proposes sort of building on the by right language that you had around emergency shelters to support state-owned, community-operated and funded, and also institutions, facilities that are privately held but really serve a public function. That would encompass our mental health care facilities that we see a great demand for all across our communities, like we do emergency shelters, and sort of say these are important, and communities should allow them to move forward. So that was just sort of one specific provision that I wanted to make sure to touch on before we jump to sort of the investment piece, which as Rep. Barkley alluded to, includes both some tax incentives and some investments. So so this bill proposes three things: eliminating the annual cap on the downtown village and village center tax credit program. We know that in so many of our communities, there's an incredible general store. There's some housing projects in my communities that those tax incentives have helped accelerate or make the math work a little better. So any project that meets program guidelines and criteria would be eligible for the downtown village center tax credit program.
Do you have a notion? I mean, we've battled to increase this for years. And I'm just curious if you have a notion of what you think the projected uptake would be.
I think that's a great question for JFO.
Okay, I'll ask it.
Or VHFA.
Would also,
Or VHFA.
or
Yeah.
VHFA.
Well, both. Anyway,
And the department.
It is money.
So Alex, when he's here at 10.
Alex will be here shortly.
We also would exempt from the property transfer tax the rehab of properties for mixed income residential development. So again, finding ways to encourage and incentivize the development of the projects that we are looking to promote in our communities. And it would also—
That's an extension sort of on the VHIP program?
No, so this is the property.
Oh, property transfer tax, right, sorry.
Tax. So if you sell a property
Right.
to someone who is
Got it.
going to redevelop that for mixed income residential use.
Isn't some of the property transfer tax dedicated to housing?
Yeah, because
A lot of
the VHCB.
Yeah. So
No, and-
in some sense, you're robbing
Yeah, you don't,
PayPal.
Yeah, and I think that, this is about, building capital stacks for projects like this, are really complicated. And I think anything we can do for a specific project to make the math work, especially if we're focused on, mixed income and affordable
so,
housing.
sorry, forgive me, because my brain had gone elsewhere for a moment. Is this suggesting that local communities get to add like a local option tax to their property transfer tax?
So if I
Okay.
have a property that would be, a prime for redevelopment for mixed income housing, and I sell it to you, there is a property transfer tax
Right, and
on
you're
that
proposing
sale,
that-
and this would exempt that if the purpose of the sale was to redevelop
Right.
it for mixed income residential.
Which is a little, to go to Ann's point, it is a little bit robbing for Peter to pay Paul, given that I'd love to have us finally do 100% to VHCB, which does a lot of that work for us.
Yeah, and I think the idea here is this is like so that goes to a big fund that gets allocated to projects. This says, hey, if it helps make a particular project move forward maybe a little faster, because you get that direct reduction in the sale price. And again, as we know, the math on many projects in my community right now don't work.
Right.
And so they don't even move forward. They don't go to VHCB to access funding because
What's
the
the
purchase price.
What's the dollar amount with that? Do you have a notion?
Again, a great thing to ask
Yeah.
tax and JFO and the department. The last tax incentive piece is a property tax valuation freeze. So capping property tax values for 5 years for the ed fund portion for rehab of blighted buildings to be rehabbed or converted to mixed income residential units. So, you know, the dilapidated building is worth $40,000 now on the grand list. Freeze that value for a 5-year period. Again, to help accelerate the development of those projects and make the math work. And this is sort of a but for.
Yes, and I've talked to the tax commissioner about this. I spent yesterday listening to schools, and we're looking at an 18 to 20% increase in the property tax. How many of these, I mean, this is not New York City. How many blighted buildings do we have that, you know?
So I drove through Hardwick on my way down here. There is a property right at the corner of the downtown that every time I drive by, the porch sags a little further, and the, you know, peeling asphalt shingles fly off in the wind, and I you know, on Ways and Means we hear all the time about the giant hole that we're working to address in our ed fund this year. I think the concept here
It's not just this year. That's
is
the
a
problem.
but for. So that property is going to sit there,
Yeah.
and it's going to sit there, and it is not contributing all that it could to our ed fund. And a short-term 5-year freeze might help encourage someone to take on the project of dumping a ton of money into that building to get those units back online, which 6 years from now will contribute a heck of a lot more to our ed fund and provide more long-term sustainability to that
If the
fund.
people that move in there can absorb the shock of their property tax in their rent. I mean, you can freeze it for 5 years, but that 5 years, everybody else's property tax is going up to cover that. When the 5 years end, those people, I'm assuming lower income people, are going to get hit with a big property tax. I mean, I just have trouble. We have a crisis, and rather than biting the bullet and saying we need to raise some money, what we're doing is we're trying to incent people by saying taxes are a bad thing, so we will free you from taxes for 5 years.
I don't think we're trying to say the taxes are a bad thing. I think we're
No,
trying to
that's-
say
but-
we want to do everything we can on with a bunch of different levers to make redevelopment projects with our existing housing stock work better so that they happen. Right now, that, you know, that building has been sitting there for 10 years, and so we're not trying to say the taxes are bad. We're trying to say that the math of purchasing that building and renovating it is hard to make work right now. And if during that initial startup phase, folks are kind of freezed at that current rate, we will then get to a project that is redeveloped, would be ad on the grand list for a much higher value.
This is you channeling tips here, baby.
Representative Sims, you know, we can still have this conversation. I'm wondering if Joint Fiscal Office is working on a fiscal note, and I'll just say that we in our committee and in finance can have multiple conversations whether we really narrow this provision focused on extremely blighted properties or less years, or we could say no to it, you know, but I'm just sort of giving us lots of options, and I really hear Senator Cummings.
We see this bill as a conversation starter.
It's a great cut, and look what it's already launched. So, it has been introduced because you have a number for it,
Yes.
right? And it's H
719.
719. And so you're getting, I assume, to go to Keisha's question, you have a fiscal note that's being developed now on it?
I think that's something that has to be requested.
Okay.
But now that we have a number, and maybe I'll just shift very quickly because you also asked about the total price tag beyond tax incentives.
Yeah,
And so
just curious.
This bill contemplates an additional $6 million for VHEP program.
Right.
We all know.
Started in this committee, yeah.
A $2 million appropriation for the manufactured home improvement repair program. Again, we're focusing on what is already there and we know is working. $1 million for the Healthy Homes Initiative. $8 million, and this is the one sort of new piece, to establish a housing infrastructure revolving loan program. So this would be administered by VHFA, available to developers of residential units to fund infrastructure like water, sewer, roads, to help serve the construction of housing and mixed-use developments with interest rates capped at 1.5%. So, we all recognize that you need the infrastructure to support the development as well as financing to help support the specific projects. And then $5 million to the HFA's missing middle income home ownership program, which this bill suggests be renamed as the Vermont Affordable Home Development Program,
Good,
recognizing that that title has
good idea.
not maybe been as clear about what we're trying to do. And then it also includes a 2.5 one-time investment for redevelopment of 50 units on the Johnson Vermont State University campus to be available to the general public at HUD at fair market rates. That is, I think, an underutilized facility that is really well suited towards conversion and hence the focus for the specific ask. So I haven't done the math to total that all, but I see you've got a list.
Yeah, no, I've got a list going. Guys, I mean, that's gonna be an issue this year, so. Wendy, you had a question.
Yes, and thank you for all of this. And I appreciated you discussing what has happened since last year. And I just want to ask you and the others if your local governments or someone is keeping a tally of what's been happening since the home bill. We did loosen some regulations, and it would be helpful to know the impact of those regulations. And our towns aren't necessarily able to tell us what that is because of the software that is generally used. So have you found ways to tally? It sounds like you're doing it on your own.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do that
we have-
anecdotally on my own, but I think that's a great question. Like someone should be gathering all the stories.
Yes.
You know,
Maybe you should have VLCT in there.
we
to
could.
Oh,
survey their
I'm
members.
asking everyone.
We
Don't.
could actually do that as a committee. And send out to the whole legislature, just ask people to send us what our stories are from their community.
Yeah, but I just wanted to hear
also-
from them if they
I
have
also will put in a
ideas.
plug
Yeah,
for a Rep. Bartlett's bill, which contemplates sort of statewide housing goal targets
Oh,
and a
okay.
reporting mechanism so that we have better answers. So
Okay.
that there
Good
are
idea.
state agencies who have set goals and are charged with monitoring the progress.
Anne has a,
No, I was just saying, we usually do that by number of building permits.
oh, right.
And
Yes.
And so
You can get at
that's
that.
an easier one.
Assuming
You
all
have to get more
towns.
granular.
Right, but we need to go to
Did
all the
we, did
towns.
we issue more building permits last year or this year than the year before we did anything?
Right, right.
Because it takes a while for things to get up and running.
It does, but I'm encouraged, especially about the shelter that was made available. That's wonderful.
Like,
Oh, is
it really did make a difference.
your latest?
So, I'm just curious before you guys scoot upstairs, the Act 250, did you incorporate the NRB's recommendations, a whole cloth? Are they all of those recommendations in this bill?
This does not represent a kind of one-to-one with the NRB story
Okay.
study, but it includes a number of those
Of
key
recommendations,
pieces. And I think, there's fun work ahead of all of us to take the NRB study, the designation study, the land use mapping study, and hopefully,
Right. Yeah, which we aren't gonna be able to fully integrate this year because they aren't all finished. The NRB's is the only complete report, as I recall, I believe, as of yesterday.
Yeah.
And mapping
And-
isn't fully finished. No, mapping's, but the work isn't finished.
No, we've been talking about rehabbing housing, and we've had a program to, with financial incentives to rehab and redo blighted housing. I think before we start doing more, we should know
How it's doing.
how many units we've rehabbed and
We'll get
why.
that from Alex.
I think we need to hear from the building trades. Why aren't they rehabbing more? I mean, is the incentive we have not enough? Is what's causing that? Why do we need to do more? what's the problem with what we've done.
Well, and how's what we've done working, because we know it's working pretty well. And we'll have Alex in to
Okay.
update us on VHIP and ADUs.
And happy to suggest some local developers, other folks on the
No,
ground.
Yeah.
that'd be great, because we heard from one yesterday who's used it. So it's almost, I mean, I know a lot of people who've used it.
Yeah, and
Anything else before you guys go?
And
Senator-
maybe with just ending it.
Oh, Keisha, sorry, Keisha's got it, sorry, Catherine.
Well, I don't want to
Keisha's got a
interrupt
question.
Representative Sims' words. Was that your like closing? Was that your closing statement? Or did you want to answer that question?
Both and?
I think she was
In
about
one,
to
I was
answer.
gonna bring it all on home. I think those, again, we've made historic investments. Those monies are going out. It's making a difference. And I think we know that we can't just buy our way out of this. And there is no one silver bullet. And, I think this bill, as your bills have in the past, and I'm sure will, continue to contemplate a whole variety of strategies that we need to attack this massive problem, and continue to make change. And so it's about investments, it's about land use regulations, about changes to the municipal zoning and review level. It's like, this is an all hands on deck moment.
Agreed.
And, applaud the work that you've done to build omnibus bills in the past, and look forward to continuing to working with you to do that again.
Thank you. Yes, as you say it, we're bringing it home. Be home. That's the name of this bill that we're working on. Keisha, you have something that you'd like to end with?
Yeah, I mean, we have them for a little longer, so we don't
Oh,
have
we
to.
do.
rush
I'm
them out
sorry.
the
I
door.
thought the bell was banging away here.
And I do need to transition to my next thing, but happy
Okay.
to.
Okay,
answer
so
a question
yeah.
and/or-
But
And
I
we'll just
thought
have a
we had
longer break.
everybody till 10, but
But-
maybe we're then gonna pivot to lunch council at 10.
Right, that's right.
after they-
So two questions, and maybe Ellen can finish off the answers, but I'd just love to hear all of your thinking as you crafted this bill around landlord-tenant law and appeals issues and making the timeline certain and shorter, because we're throwing a lot of ideas at the wall and we're figuring out how to get on the same page with everybody else. And I know Representative Small, who it looks like couldn't be here this morning, that was of great concern to her. So if you could just dive a little deeper into those two pieces, what did you leave off the list? What was sort of the full package of principles in those two areas?
And if I could just tag on to that question, the NRB report was not able to come to consensus on appeals. So I'm curious how you have, and just to tag on to patients, because it's one of
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit more about what this bill does. So it narrows the scope of appeals such that an appeal shall not include any residential or mixed-use development containing up to 25 units within an area served by municipal water and sewer, or any permitted residential or mixed-use development that does not require conditional use review. So sort of saying for residential and mixed-use development, in our downtown cores, those are not appealable. It also continues to look at, and I know you talked a lot last time about any 10 persons. And so this bill recommends shifting from a specific number to a minimum percentage for that municipality, right? 10 people means different things in Lowell and Burlington. And so this sort of says, let's ensure that there's a
do it per capita rather than
per capita,
got
significant number to sort of warrant appealing. And it also, as Rep. Bartley alluded to, has a sort of skin in the game, so it requires a kind of appeal bond, so that if someone is appealing their, putting down money, so that, if they're not successful in that appeal, there's compensation for the party that had to go through the process.
I was gonna
So there's
say,
some financial liability for the appeal.
yeah, that you can get 10 people, they may not have the money. It's possible, has happened, that an outside person who may have interest in this project can finance the appeal. And
Yeah, and
that gets a little,
Yeah, that's what happened in Woodstock with Stafford Commons.
well,
We,
the parking
yeah.
garage.
exactly, the parking garage.
And so, right now, as long as you get the number, and you can throw up endless, appeals on projects. And so this, contemplates, asking to have a little skin in the game. There is a motion to waive that appeal, an option to file a motion to appeal the bond as well. So throwing out ideas, and then there's also some pieces around timelines, requiring DRBs to issue a permit within 60 days, and also allowing Act 250 permits contingent on A&R water and sewer appeals as well. I've sort of lost my numbers here.
Right, so that gives us a notion of what's included in the appeals piece.
On a different topic, if
Yeah.
that's okay?
Oh, you got a copy?
I did.
You.
They're in the
Very smart.
There was a section, delegation of review authority to municipalities.
Yes.
So you're looking at delegation of Act 250 as opposed to exemption from Act 250.
Both hands. So there's
Okay.
some trigger exemptions, looking at the 1055.
But it's very
and
interesting.
also
And
municipal delegation.
I'm glad it's up for conversation because I've had an interest in that for a while. Did you talk to towns about that? Because delegation, the way I understand it, means that the towns have all of the responsibilities of the Act 250 law. And so that is very different than having an exemption. So are towns showing interest in delegation?
I mean, I
And
think,
some
I think
towns can manage that and some can't.
as
Right,
we-
but even some that could
May not want.
may not want to, is
Exactly.
what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a big
personally, I think we need
responsibility.
to talk about delegation because that way it keeps the structure and the requirements intact.
Right.
But
and
there
so-
are, pluses and minuses to everything. So I'm curious about the conversations that you've had about it.
Yeah, so this carries forward that idea that we talked a lot about last session, and for communities that are interested in and meet high quality, bylaws and other zoning rules and regulations, like, can have the opportunity to take it on, so we avoid that redundancy. It's an option on the table for municipalities that have an interest and meet certain criteria that demonstrate that they are able to bring that review. So that's one piece of it, and we're also contemplating additional exemptions around Act 254 housing development in modeling after the sort of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 idea. Full exemption for housing and mixed-use development in our designated areas, and up to a quarter mile around it. So sort of two different concepts that may work in different ways in different communities.
Right.
So if you want to
It
take it
would be
on and you meet
interesting.
our,
Yeah.
criteria, you can take it on. And for these areas, and again, that of our total land mass are a really very small portion of Vermont,
Right.
are, designated areas where we already have infrastructure, we already have density, saying these are while we preserve and protect our hills and our farm fields, these are the places that we want to encourage development to
Oh,
happen,
sure.
offering that full exemption.
No, and I agree with the goal. It's just they're very different from each other. So that'll just be a conversation.
I
I
think that's a conversation.
yeah. Just
A
flagging it.
conversation starter. Ideas we want to put on the table for you all to
Right.
consider as you build this amazing bill. And I'm going to leave the rest of it to my other colleagues because
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, team. Who else do I have behind me?
Sorry, I never received that.
Okay, you guys are all set?
Yeah.
Anything else we want to hear about?
I think I just wanted to make sure that we briefly touch on Senator Winfield's question about landlord tenant law.
Yeah.
No,
Because it's an issue that we're.
absolutely. I think we, as a team, when we talked internally with different stakeholders, it wasn't necessarily a big topic of discussion. I think it's important to all of us, but we wanted to make sure that we have room to take things out of the bill that maybe don't make sense, or put things back into the bill that really do. I know that my committee in the House is really going to be focusing on landlord tenant law. So I think there's absolutely room to kind of bolster this to be an even better bill.
So there
I would
is
just-
some.
Well, so
Yeah.
I think what's helpful is to hear, even in broader brushstrokes, what you're hearing about landlord-tenant relationships, rental vacancy, et cetera. You know, we're trying to take these proposals in the context of a really low rental vacancy rate where we can't sort of force landlords to rent to people. And so we're going to be digging into why won't people accept Section 8 tenants, what's going on with eviction, you know, what risk are people taking on. So when I say landlord-tenant law, it's quite broadly, you know, just looking at how we can make sure we have a healthy, available rental stock to people.
And I tag on to that, how do we do that in the time frame we have this session? So it may be requiring a deeper dive off session. It's just a huge topic.
Absolutely. So if I may add, Madam Chair, that Representative Small, I can't speak for her because she's not here, but from what I gathered in our conversations when we were developing this bill, one of her main concerns was that she would like to protect tenants from landlords evicting them in order to do a quote unquote qualifying improvement, which is language in the bill, and maybe just make sure that the reason for vacating the apartment or the unit would be to bring a previously uninhabitable unit back into the market, back up to the standards where we would want somebody to be living. So that was her primary concern because, of course, in downtown Winooski, housing is really, really tight, and there are some very old buildings that need to be brought up to speed so that people can live comfortably in them. And I hope I'm not misspeaking for her, and I'm sorry she couldn't be here, but perhaps that will be another conversation for you to have, for the committee to have. So thank you.
Yeah.
We know intent's important.
Yeah. No, here. Anything else? Closing statement from the two of you? I wish I was an owl. Keisha could see.
I would just like to say thank you again to the committee. We were very excited when you brought forth S100, got it over the finish line last year, and we do really hope to build on that effort. And as I said before, this really is a conversation starter, this bill. We brought together very diverse opinions and were able to come to an agreement, as I said at the press conference the other day, by putting aside the deal breakers, the things that were going to shatter this coalition. And we focused on the things that we were able to agree on. So we're bringing this to you because we know that you're jumping out, getting ahead on this Be Home bill, and perhaps it's going to start with you and finish with us. But however it works, this is why we're really grateful for the opportunity to speak to you, because these are our concepts from the House perspective, and you all are going to bring your concepts from what you're hearing about things that have been happening as a result of your great bill from last year. So anything we can do to collaborate with you, don't hesitate to invite us back in. I think involving many different organizations in this conversation is going to be very helpful for you, particularly VLCT, to get some of that data about how your programs are helping communities. I just know anecdotally from my district, I have a number of very beautiful, very old blighted properties that are totally vacant. They are not contributing much at all to our revenue for the state. If they could be rehabbed, they would contribute greater to the revenue of the state. But right now they're just sitting there and they're taking on water, they're taking on animals.
They're housing animals.
many of those folks who own those properties don't live in the towns that I represent. And they're not even really on their radar. They know they own that piece of property, but they've got many other irons in the fire, or things are happening in their families and they don't have time to deal with it. So those are the properties that we really want to incentivize folks to fix up and create habitable units out of them, multiple habitable units.
Do you have any, Lisa, on that, do you have any notion of why those kinds of properties haven't taken advantage of our VHIP program? I mean, we have this amazing incentive for people to be addressing exactly those properties. So I'm a little puzzled why anybody who owns a property and sees $50,000 coming at them as a match isn't doing something about it.
Right, I totally understand that, and it can be a mystery unless you've lived among that population. And as I said, a lot of people have so many other things going on in their lives that this building that they bought for a very low price isn't a priority for them. They're just, the property taxes are fairly low on the building, and they don't really maintain it, so there's not a whole lot of upkeep costs on it. I can think of one particular lovely building, and the folks are A, distrustful of government, and B, don't have the time because their home lives are kind of imploding on them right now. And even though they've been approached multiple times by municipal officials, they are reluctant to prioritize the time because they just don't have the time to figure out how to apply for state grants and move forward with their project. And I think that's part of what we spoke about last year when we put municipal technical assistance in the BAA, is that little towns like the ones that I represent don't have the personnel to be able to devote to going out and finding these landlords and saying, hey, we've got these great programs for you. This is a list of them. We would love for you to apply for this grant. We can help you.
And we'll help you.
But a lot of people, especially in rural areas that are far away from Montpelier, don't understand what's available to them. As a representative, I try to let all my town offices know, when a new grant comes out, I send it to them and I say, you might want to apply for this. And many times I get a response that says, we don't have time to apply for it.
And that's where your RPCs should be being,
Yes,
because
so
we also
we're-
gave them money
yes.
for technical assistance.
So we are drawing them in, and our RDCs, particularly my RDC, is working very, very hard to choose one vacant lighted building in each town in the county or in their jurisdiction and make it into something beautiful. And they have done that in several of the towns in Franklin County, which is where I'm a representative.
Yeah.
So that's really positive, but I think getting that message out and having the RPCs and the RDCs work together with us as representatives and senators, I think that's an evolving conversation, and I think we're on the right track, but it is going to take time. However, we do not have time to wait to create more units of housing. We need to do it now, and we need to remove as many roadblocks as possible, and we need to incentivize people. And I think hitting them in the pocketbook is a really good place to start, because that's going to make some of these constituent landlords open their eyes and say, whoa, I'm going to get this particular tax incentive for doing this. Maybe it's time in my life to prioritize doing this.
Yeah, I hear you on that. On the other hand, we're giving them more money in VHIP than we would be giving them in these rundown properties in tax exemptions. So, I mean, that's one. And two, the opportunity to actually fill those houses with paying tenants strikes me as a great economic incentive for the VHIP, so I think the tax exemption means a lot less to them than the VHIP program, in all honesty.
Possible. I will definitely grant you that point, but overall, it's money. And that's what talks, at least in my communities.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
you asked for my perspective,
Yeah, yeah,
and
no, no,
that's my
No, I
perspective.
mean, we're all just thinking about
Yeah.
this and
So
sharing.
you've got a really tough job here, but I hope we've
We all-
given you the framework to work on. And
It's great.
we would love for you to take our bill and work with it.
We're already
See
working
what
with
we can
Aspen,
do.
so this is
Yeah,
good.
it's great. I love the collaboration between the House and the Senate on this particular issue because it's something that affects every single one of us.
Oh, my gosh, absolutely. And you, I think, have.
No, I was just saying, there's people that own property. They may have inherited it, they may have loaned it for a long time, and they're getting up in age. We're not talking small projects here. We're talking about a blighted, dilapidated building
Big
and
project.
turn that into,
Productive use.
productive, yeah. I mean, that is a huge undertaking that probably very few of the owners of blighted buildings have the capacity to take on. You know, I think what you see with VHIP is somebody will buy the building and rehab it, but then they're gonna rent it out, and it's an income producer for them. So,
We,
and we don't have
so
you know,
we
a
should,
list of what.
sorry, I just want to make sure, and this is a longer conversation, but we
It's a big
need to
topic.
talk about housing retention, and that's why we're having a public safety discussion with our fellow committees of jurisdiction, because if you take the VHIP money, you have to prioritize housing people who were previously unhoused. And we're finding that for a lot of people, that's becoming an expensive hardship. So, we just have to remember not everyone wants to participate in VHIP because of the conditions that we have. And that's just a reality we have to face.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Senator Cummings for bringing up that point about older Vermonters. That is so true. I have so many folks in my community who maybe were farmers their entire lives, and they have this home that they've lived in since they were born there, and the home is slowly falling into disrepair, and they just don't have the energy to even think about putting in a new kitchen or putting in a new bathroom that's maybe more accessible for folks who have compromised ability to get around. So I really appreciate you highlighting that population for us.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it earlier with our downsizing.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
But also, some of this ADU VHIP money is enabling people exactly like that to stay in their home, create an ADU that helps them finance.
They don't have the ability.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's where we need
I can
some
show
more
you a house
navigators to
within
help.
5 miles, an old farmhouse. They had, I think the state put in the program, a new septic system for it. When it went on the market, the only thing that was worth salvaging, it was standing upright, was the septic system. Everything else, and it's a big functioning farm, but
Yeah.
every cent you have goes into the farm.
So we're gonna have to continue this conversation. It's a rich one and one that we all feel fairly strongly. We are scheduled for break now. We have Alex and Craig coming in at 10. And so we thank you all very much for your work on this, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much
thank you.
for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, so let's go off live.